Alright guys, so today we're going to simply make a little animation for the hammer that is right here. I'm gonna make it smash this wall into pieces, and this is just gonna be a tutorial on how you can make animation in MoveObjects, because animations can make it a little more fluent, a little cooler to look at, because instead of just clicking there and it explodes. Of course that works, but it is always nice to have a little animation. So I'm gonna add an animation that you can use the hammer. Well, you could use the chipper as well, but since this is a vertical surface and not a horizontal one, the chipper doesn't really work unless you modify the entity, and I'm not gonna do that. So I'm just gonna use the hammer alone. You can do this with most other objects, well, a few objects by default, and if you modify them, you can make any object into an object that will actually move in this fashion. But I think the hammer is the only one. The chipper moves a little bit, and then there are a few big ones like the bookshelf. It's kind of the same thing, but they weren't really made for this kind of... they're just made to move once, but this hammer is to swing. So let me just show you the animation here. It basically just hammers it and it smashes it into pieces, as you would expect, I guess. This whole script is kind of already found in the original. If you go to the prison levels in the Amnesia, you can find this script, but it might be a little confusing. So I'm going to write it down and explain what is going on in this script, and then you might understand it a little better, because even myself, it is kind of confusing to just go there and grab the code, because you never know what they're going to reference, because if you don't write the code yourself, it's a lot harder to understand what is going on, because you might have a variable pointing somewhere and you don't know if you even have that variable made if you didn't write the code yourself. So therefore it's very important to write it yourself, or at least know what's going on, because that's it's difficult for me to just pick up frictional script right away. So I'll have to analyze it, and it takes a little while. So, but anyways, I'm gonna write it down and try to explain exactly what's going on. So I guess let's jump over to the tutorial. Alright, so let's see here. This is the whole project as it is when it's done, and the script is somewhat large, so I'm gonna have to keep the window open when I rewrite it so that I don't forget anything. But what you're gonna do in the level is pretty simple though. I guess I could either explain it or I could recreate it. Let's just select the areas and the little hammer that is invisible right there, and I'll just move it to the side. Oh, without that. Well, yeah, okay. So we'll have that there. This is basically what the whole thing consisted of in the level. So let me just recreate that. Let's start by placing down the wall or whatever destructible object you want to break. I believe this one is found in special, actually. Special, isn't it at the bottom? No, I guess it wasn't here. What was this thing again? Maybe it was in gameplay. I don't quite remember. Let's see at the bottom here. No. Ah, there it is. Okay. Secret passage. This one's already broken. This one is fixed still. So I'll just rotate it here, and we'll place that one over there. And that is going to be our destructible wall. You might want to use another entity. I don't know. This one works, but if you want to use something else, then be sure to do that and use that one instead. Like if you want to use the hole on the floor, you can do that. And there are a few other ones, and maybe you can make your own entities that you want to blow up, and maybe you're not even using the hammer, you're using your own entities, you just want the animation. But first of all, since this is the object we want to use the hammer on, I'm going to name it fake wall. And it has the F there, yeah? Fake wall, and that's uncapitalized at A. Oh, right, I need to... should probably delete that. Okay, fake wall. So we have the fake wall there, which is going to be what we're going to break, of course. And to break it, what we're going to place in level, as I said, is pretty simple. This is the area which I used. I just placed this area in front of it like that. Which is the area that you're going to use the hammer on. You can use the hammer directly on the entity, but I like to use areas because I have a lot more control over areas. You can put areas anywhere and use items anywhere using them, but there are not you cannot use items on every entity, and sometimes the hitbox on the entity is a little difficult to get working, or you might just not click on it, like accidentally miss it or whatever. So I like to use areas because they're more reliable, I think. So just place an area over it, and I already named it here, but I'm gonna name it area use item, just simply enough. And if you're gonna use an area, use an item on an area, you need to check off item interaction or else it won't work. I'm unsure exactly why that is, but it's probably because it processes, calculates the area as a different sort of area. Alright, so we have that item interaction, which is going to allow us to use this hammer, which I just placed. This is a very standard, very simple hammer entity, which is named item hammer, and that is the one that we're going to be using on the area. And once that has been triggered, because we'll just simply add a callback that checks when you use the hammer on the area, it's going to execute a little animation, and the animation itself is mostly done through the script. You just need two things. They're right over here. You need two things in the map. First of all, let's open up the item section, which is where you will find the hammer. Let's find hammer. It's where is it? Ah, stone hammer. That was it. Stone hammer. We have one called stone_hammer, which is that entity right there. And don't confuse it with stone hammer move, because stone hammer move is the object that moves. It's not an item that you pick up, but it's the same kind of object. It looks the exact same, but it acts a bit differently. The same thing with the chipper over here, if you want to use that, but I'm not. So this object is kind of like the bookshelves. They move instead of doing whatever else they're doing. So you want to place this one, let's see. First of all, let's rotate it so it's proper. And this is basically what we're going to be banging. And as you can see, that one over there is rotated like that. So it's rotated pretty far back because that's the starting position. It's not going to start by looking up. So we're going to have to rotate it like that. And you might want to turn off the grid to get it more precise. That one over there is about that rotation. So we'll use approximately that. And you want to move it somewhat away, but depending on the area, because the area is also a little important, or quite important actually, but depending on where the area is, you want to move the hammer accordingly. So it really depends on how you want this to swing. If you want it to swing here and up there, then you can have it about here. If you want to swing it from all the way over here and maybe like that, so it has a bigger radius all the way like that, if you get what I'm saying. It depends on how far away from the area that you want it to be. So I'm just going to delete that one and delete that one just so I can rename them the same. And I'm going to name this one, I named that one item hammer. I'm going to name this one object hammer to separate them. Object hammer, like that, so that we know in the script when we're talking about the object and the item, so we don't confuse them. And then we're also going to need an area. I'm just going to duplicate this one and use it instead. I like to make them small because, well, it doesn't really matter what the size is, but I just like to make something very small, so it's not as much in the way, you know. So we'll have that area there, and you want to probably place it at the same whatever axis this is. This is Z, the Z axis, or Z, yeah. You want to set it at the same axis as that. Well, if your whole thing is rotated along the x-axis, you want to use that, of course. Just put it at the same there. I'm not sure if that really matters, but oh well. Basically, the hammer is going to rotate around the middle point of this area, so it's kind of important where you place this, because if you place it here, it's going to rotate around there, which is approximately like that. And if you put the area over there, then it's going to rotate a little bit more curved, and that's also why you want the handle to point directly to the middle of this little area so that it doesn't look in like unnatural. So we'll have it about there. That should probably work, although this might be a little far away, so put it a little closer. You might have to do some trial and error with this placement because you probably won't get it right the first time, and I probably won't get it right the first time. So this one, it's not much used. It's not really used in the script at all. You just give it a name. I'm going to call it area rotate hammer. And then you click on the hammer and you go on entity, bottom, angular offset area rotate hammer. And that is all you need to do. You just need to associate that area with the hammer, and you don't need to do any scripting with that. So whenever you move the hammer in the script now, it's already going to calculate the area that it rotates around. So that is all we need to do for now, except you need to check off active, because the hammer is not going to be there until you click on it, you know, until you use the item on the wall. So we're going to save the map, and that's all we need to do there. We can jump over to the scripting. So let's just minimize that for now. And I guess I could, let's close that, and I'll just delete that just in case. The cache files are pretty annoying sometimes. I'll just duplicate the script file, and yeah, this one I'll just name test, just so that I can have it open. Oh, apparently, it doesn't really matter. I'll just use text edit for this one, and then we can open the other one. I want to use TextMate for that one though, like that. So we'll just erase that file and start over. So first of all, we want to make void on start, and let me increase the size here so we can see it a little better. Void on start. And this is, you probably know what this is, and you probably should know what this is. It's basically ran when you start the map for the first time. So in here we want to put the use item callback. So add use item callback. Any of these scripts that I'm going to be using are found on the engine scripts page that I have linked in the description. So if you want to look at some of the parameters, you can do that. Just basically you copy paste the whole thing into your script, and then you can edit the parameters, because by default they will have like, for example, string and in parent name or whatever. So but you want to replace that with your own parameters. In this one, the first parameter is a string, which is the internal name of this operation, and that one is not required, so I'm going to keep it empty. It basically, if you're going to remove this callback or reference it or check for it, then you can give it a name. But if you're not going to do that, you're not really... I like to keep it empty because it keeps things simple in a way. Like, I don't give it a name because I'm not going to use the name, because this thing is going to disappear when it's done anyway, so it's like auto remove, which is the last boolean. I'll get to that. The second string is the item you want to use. So I'm going to use item hammer, which is the item in your inventory, which is the item, the object for the item hammer that is in the level. So just make that name match, and then the area or object you want to use it on. You could put fake wall in here, but since I like to use areas, I'm going to use area use item. Yeah, like that. And the next one is the callback. That is going to be, basically it's going to run everything inside this callback block when this happens. When you use the item on the area, it's going to run everything that is inside the block that you're going to name in here. So I'm going to name mine hammer animation. It doesn't matter what you name it, but you might want to name it something that is relatable to the script. And the last boolean is basically true or false if you want this callback to be removed as soon as it's executed. So the first time it passes, it'll be removed. True. If it's set to false, it will allow you to redo it, which you don't really want. I mean, if the wall is broken, you don't want to use the hammer on it again and basically just make it hammer swing again and make all the particles and stuff. So you don't want to do that. So that is all we need in onStart. So we don't really need to add anything in there, but you probably have a lot of other things in your onStart already. So just put it anywhere in there. Remember, you cannot have two onStarts. You need to merge all of yours. So, and now I'm probably going to be adding something above here later, but I'll get to that soon. So start with void hammer animation, which should be matching to that name you made, and the parameters for this type of callback is string and in as item, which is the item you're using, and string and in as entity, which is the entity you're using it on. These are just aliases that you can refer to in your script, but I'm not going to do it in this script. You just need to have them look like that, but you don't need to use them. So in here, first of all, we want to set the object hammer entity active so that we can start swinging it back and forth. So set entity active, and right there we go. And the name of the object is object hammer, which I named in the editor, and the state we want it to be, whether it's going to be active or not active. It's already inactive, so we want to put it to true so that it's active. And after that, we also want the player to look at this animation. It's basically just adds to the effect that you actually have to turn and look at it to do this, because it's kind of like the player is doing this. Start player look at, and the object we want to look at is object hammer. Object hammer, and the speed, I'm just going to be using the same values as they used in the original script. You can adjust these values if you want to, but since they work pretty well already, I see no reason to. But so instead of me having to experiment with a lot of random values, I'm just going to be using the ones that they used in the original, which is, in this case, they used 2, which is 2 minimum and 2 maximum. So you're going to be looking at it at a speed of 2 units. I'm not sure what kind of units they're using in this speed, but 2 in speed. And the last one is the callback when you're looking at it, which is I'm just going to keep it blank because I'm not going to use it. All right, so there's going to be a value here, but I'm going to add that a little later, a variable. So let's start by adding the timers that is going to specify the speed and precision of this animation. Add timer. Let's start by giving the timer a name. Usually I don't give the timers names if I'm not gonna refer to them, but this time I'm going to refer to them, so I'm gonna have to, this is the same kind of deal as up here. If you're not gonna refer to it, you don't need to give it a name. But this time I'm going to refer to the timers, so I'm going to give them a name. And this one I'm going to call move hammer, which is the same as they did. Move hammer, which is basically, this is the timer for when the hammer is going to move towards the wall. So moving the hammer is not just like you gotta start animation and it swings back and forth. No, you gotta very carefully define every movement and speed. So it's gonna be a little cramped in the timer that we're going to make. So the first one is going to be executed very quickly at 0.1 seconds. So it's kind of going to start right away. But the reason you want to use an add timer instead of just running it right away is because we're going to reuse this same timer several times. So for every swing, you know. And the last one is the callback, which is the same as in hammer animation. It's the callback that's going to happen when this timer has expired. And I'm going to call it timer move hammer. I like to name my timers with timer to start off with so that I know that it is a timer type. And that is one of the timers, but we're not just going to move the hammer to the wall. We're going to move it back and we're going to play sounds and all that. So I'm going to duplicate this line and paste it 4 times. And right now it indents because it does that in this thing. All right, so the second timer, I'm going to edit the name of the timer to hammer sound. That is the sound effect, the little boink as you hit the hammer. And this timer is going to be executed when the hammer reaches the wall, which is going to be a little later. 0.27 is what they use, so I'm going to use that. You can keep this one the same in all of them because I'm going to keep all of them in the same timer function. And the third timer is resetting the hammer. Reset hammer. Hammer, there we go. And it's going to run, each of these are going to be a little later than the previous one. So this one is going to be 0.4, which is you swing the hammer to the wall, you play the sound, and a little bit later than the sound has been played, after the sound has been played, you're going to move the hammer back to its original position so that you can swing it again. And the last one I'm going to call repeat, which is going to determine when the hammer is going to swing back again. It's also going to twist in with a lot of ending this whole function. And this one is going to be ran at 0.6 seconds. But it's not, of course, going to end it. It's just going to be repeating. So it takes like just over half a second for the hammer to swing back, so to swing into the fake wall and back before it does it again. And you can determine how many times it's going to swing back and forth before this wall is actually broken. So we also want to play some sound effects. But I mean, these are not essential, but they do make for a nice effect. So we want to use play sound at entity and semicolon. And this one, there are going to be 3 of them. So I'm just going to use the same names. I probably won't remember these names on my own. First of all, the internal name, I'm going to keep it empty because I'm not going to use it. The second one is this file name, which I'm probably not going to remember, as I said. So I'm just going to write it down directly from the other script, which is 15_rock_break. Basically a little rock breaking sound as you hit the hammer or swing it or whatever. Basically, these, like all these sound effects you can find in the sounds folder of Amnesia, and you can explore that as much as you want, but just for the sake of it, I'm not gonna take my time to do that. I'm just gonna use these ones because they are probably the best ones to use. Unless you have your own sounds, you can use those, of course. And now the next parameter is the object you want to play the sound on, and this one is gonna be played at the fake wall, which is the object itself, where the rock's breaking. Yeah. Fade time is going to be 0. And whether it's going to be saving its state is not very important, so I'm going to put it to false. Now, we're going to copy that one. Actually, I'm going to copy it there. Copy and paste, because we want to play some other sounds as well. 15, make hammer. And this one's going to be played at the player itself. So just type in player there. The fade time is apparently 0.25, so I'm just going to use that. And the last one is 03 rock move. And it's going to be played at fake wall, and it's going to be played at the volume of 2. Or I don't think it's volume, I think it's the fade to time, yeah. So as I said, these values are already defined by frictional, so I'm just going to use the same ones instead of having to mess around with them. So it makes things less, less tedious for me to find out a proper value, but these are probably the best ones anyway because they've spent more time than me. So, so far we are almost done with this hammer animation block right here, which is going to determine the speed of how the first swings are going to be. But we're going to also add a little value there, but we're going to use that very soon. So now let's start by making the timer function. Void timer move hammer, which is what we named it in all of these. And inside here it's going to execute all of the timers, and we need to type in string and in as timer. And that is the parameter that you want to use in a timer function. And now we're going to put some if statements and else if statements to determine which timer is currently calling it, because all of them are calling it. So we want to ask this block, we want to ask the script which one of these is calling it right now. So we'll do if, parentheses, if as timer, which is the timer alias, equals string move hammer. First of all, if it's the very first timer that is calling it, then we're going to run whatever it comes after here. And since it's only going to be one function, you don't need to add a block. Normally you'd add a block like that. But since we're only going to put one function after it, you don't need to, because the script, an if statement in the script, it checks this question if the timer is move hammer, and then if it passes, it'll run what is coming after it, what precedes it, or what comes after, yeah. So basically, if that something is a block, it'll run everything in the block. If that something is not a block, it'll run only the first thing. So we're just going to put one thing because we're only going to need one thing. And that one thing is going to be the swing of the hammer. Because this timer is move hammer, we want set move object state. And the parameters, semicolon, the parameters for this one is the name of the object we want to move, which is object hammer. There we go. Object hammer, and the state we want it to is 0.4. And the state determines how far it's going to rotate. So 0.4 is almost 0.5, which is almost 90 degrees. So the hammer doesn't move quite 90 degrees, and that's why if you open up the level editor here, you can see that this one isn't rotated directly 90 degrees from up position, because 0.4 is not quite 90 degrees. And I still think this is a little too far away from the wall, but we're gonna have to test with that. It's gonna rotate about there, but we'll see. So that is that. That basically, you use the hammer on the area, and it's going to run this one. After 0.1 seconds, it's going to swing the hammer towards the object. Now, the next if statement, which is actually an else if statement, else if, and the difference between if and else if is that an if statement can be triggered, like you can have two if statements in the same block, and they can both pass. But an else if statement, if I'm not mistaken, only runs if the other one does not, or basically, if this one does not pass, it'll run this one instead. But it's not like this one can run and this one can run at the same time, I think. I haven't actually tested too much with else if statements, but since they used else if statements, I'm going to use else if statements. But they're very similar to if statements. It's just the else keyword, which is run this if the other one doesn't pass. So inside this question, we want to do the same thing. As timer equals quote hammer sound this time, which is the second timer. And this one we're going to want a block because we're going to have several things run inside here. Excuse me. Okay, so the first thing we want to run is stop player look at, which doesn't require any parameters. This will basically stop the player from being forced to look at the object hammer, because if you don't run this, the camera will forever move towards this position, so that it will get really annoying, and you want to be sure to run that. And we also want to play some sound effects. So I'm just going to copy this line there, and then we can modify it a bit. And the name doesn't need to be there. The sound effect we want to play is impact rock high. This is the sound file for when the hammer slams against the wall, which is the timer hammer sound, and the impact with the rock. It's going to be played on the player. It says, like in the script that they use the object player, probably just to make it clear enough. To be more correct, it would probably be played at the fake wall itself, because that's what that is the object that is actually generating the sound. Unless you want to use the object hammer, which might be a little more precise, I'm not sure. But They used player, probably just to make things clear. Sound is going to be 0, so I'm just going to put player in there. Doesn't matter too much. Like, ambient sounds are pretty important when you place them, because you want, if the player is wearing headphones, they'll easily hear if the sound comes from the left or the right. So you want to make sure that it comes from the correct source. But when a little sequence like this, where all the sources are very close to each other, and it's not really something you can determine where it comes from, you just know it's in this area, then it's not that important. And we want to play another sound. Actually, I already have it copied, so paste. And this one is also played at the player with the time of 0 fade. And the sound file is 15 hammer, which I'm not sure what that exact sound is, but you can find it in the sounds folder, or perhaps in a 15 folder. There are folders in there. You'll find it somewhere in there. And that will basically find the hammer, play the hammer sound effect, whatever that is. And now we'll have another else if statement for the other timer. Else if as timer equals quote, which is the next one, reset hammer. If it's resetting the hammer, it's going to do pretty much the exact same as this, except instead of moving the hammer to the wall, it's going to move the hammer back to the position it originally was. So you'll just paste that back in, and instead of using 0.4 as the state, you'll just use 0. And that'll move it back to the original position. So now we'll do another. This one is not an else if, this is just an if. And this is where I think it can run the if statements even though these have passed, but it can only run else if statements if these ones have not passed. So that's kind of what I think. As I said, I haven't tried too much with else if statements, but if statements and else if statements are very similar. They're just, I think it has something to do with when they are ran, determining depending on the other if statements in the block. And this one is going to use, this is basically a variable. This one uses a variable that I haven't yet created. So I guess I should probably get to that. First of all, this is going to be a variable which is going to determine how many times the hammer is going to swing back and forth before finishing the animation, because you can do it without this value, but if you're going to do it without this value, we'll have to keep adding timers that will you'll have to add move hammer 2, move hammer 3, move hammer 4, instead of just having this value which will run everything again, except it'll add the value and stop at a certain point. So start off with an integer int, which is the int value. Integer, it's a data type. You don't really need to worry about that. What that means, it's just a number value without decimals. And then you want to put the name of it. I'm going to name it swings, just to keep things a little easier to understand in the script. And then you can put a semicolon directly there because that's just defining it. But I'm going to start off by doing equals 0 and then semicolon, just so that this value initially starts off at 0. Because if you don't give it a value to begin with, it doesn't necessarily start off at 0 because it doesn't know if 0 is the starting point. So therefore, if you don't give it any value and then call it and ask what it is, it's probably going to either return null, which is nothing, or it might just crash. I mean, if it even gets that far, it'll probably be null, but anyway, so basically this is just going to be a counter for how many times it's ran. So far it has ran 0 times. Of course, this is before anything. This is even outside the onStart block, and not many things run outside blocks. Only when you define variables and such are things that run outside here. You can put it in here as well, but I like to keep it outside when I define these variables, because sometimes when you define a variable within a block, that block might be restricted to only that block. So if you define it inside here, it might not be accessible in here, at least in certain cases, depending on what you do, of course. But if you have it up here, it should be accessible throughout the whole file. All right, so we'll have that file, which is the int counter, and inside here, hammer animation, we want to add this to make sure that swings equals 1, and this is when the whole animation starts. It doesn't swing the hammer yet, but it's going to start the animation, so it enables the hammer and it prepares it for a swing, and therefore the value is no longer 0. It's just going to be 0. Like the value is going to be 1. Going to be set to 1, and basically you can use, instead of using these, you can use the scripts that Frictional made, which are set local var int. You can use those instead of these, but I prefer using these because they are a lot shorter. They might be a little trickier to understand, but if you understand them, they are pretty simple, and I prefer using them, but they do exactly the same. So, except for the global ones, which might do work a little differently. But I prefer just writing the primitive version. So this is going to be the counter. It starts off at 1 when you start the animation. And when you go back here, it's going to ask in this if statement, if swings, make sure it matches. Because right now, swings, like if you do just swing, it'll crash because it doesn't know what swing is. But if you do swings and make sure that this matches exactly to the variable you defined, it's going to ask if this value is less than 3. Just type that little heart there, and this little diamond bracket means less than, and then you do a 3. So since the value starts off as 0 and then is put to 1, that means it passes this little check because the value is 1, so therefore it is less than 3, because 1 is less than 3, obviously. But it's also going to check another thing, because or else it would run this 4 times before this function was done, because there are 4 timers running it. So therefore we want to make sure that it only runs once per loop, kind of. So we want to make sure that it only runs on the last timer. So I'm going to do and, which is add an, it basically adds another question. If as timer equals repeat. So the repeat timer is ran last, so therefore we're just going to make sure that the string, this little check, is ran at the very end. So here we'll add another block, because not parenthesis block, but squiggly bracket block. There we go. Curly braces, squiggly brackets. A lot of people call them differently, but curly braces. So inside here, we're going to add the timers again. So you might as well just copy these timers right here. Copy. And paste them in there. I'm going to indent them up. I think there's actually a... shortcut for doing that, but anyways. So inside here, we're going to add the timers again, but they're going to be a little different in time. It's going to happen a lot faster because we don't want to wait that long between each swing, because the swings are going to be pretty fast. So instead of 0.1, it's going to be 0.01. Instead of 0.27, it's going to be 17. 4 is going to be 3, and 6 is going to be 5. So it's a little quicker. It's not that much noticeable. You can use the same values, but you will notice it looks a little slow, kind of. Now, another thing you want to add in here, in the scripts that Amnesia or Frictional made, they have this add local variant, which is basically, if you used set local variant here, it basically makes a variable and gives it a value, which is exactly what I did here, except it does it in a fashion like this, with the name and the value. You can also use one called add local variant with the name and the value you want to add, so it'll add that value to the existing value. There's no such thing directly in the primitive version, but it's very easy to make. So you simply just add or simply just write swings, the value, let's say 1 equals swings plus 1. So basically, if the value starts off at 1, that means 1 is now gonna change into 1 plus 1, so therefore it's going to be 2 this time. So, and if this value is 2, it's going to change 2 into 2 plus 1. So it's going to just increment, like it's going to increase in value every time this block is ran. So that is kind of important, or else it'll forever swing, because it's going to check for as long as this is less than 3. And since this one adds a value, that means it will only add values up until it is 3. And since less than 3, like 3 is not less than 3, because less than 3 means anything below 3, so 2.999 forever, but not 3, because 3 is exactly 3 or more. So therefore it's only going to run all this up until that point when this is actually 3. And when this thing is actually 3, else if, that's when it's going to run this block here instead. So after the third swing, it's going to run a fourth final swing, a little slower, which is going to finish off this whole thing. It's like you do a little poke, 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 and then power smash, if you get what I'm saying. You might have seen it in the example in the beginning. It does 3 quick, and then it does 1 a little slower, just to show that it's more like a power attack, kind of. So if swings this time equals, basically, if the value is exactly 3, and of course the timer, as timer equals, repeat, just to make sure it only runs at the end of it, and that didn't quite work. There we go. It's going to run this block here. And it's also very similar to the one above, so you might as well just copy this one, because it's going to add the timers again, but at a different duration, different time, because it's going to be a little slower. But again, yeah, so this one is 0.01, which is very fast, so we'll put it to 0.2, which is a little slower. Instead of 17, 37. Instead of 3, it's 0.42. And instead of 0.5, it's actually 0.5. No, wait. It was not 42. That was a different timer that we're going to add. So this one is actually 0.5, and the existing 0.5 is 0.8. But there's another timer inside here. So we'll just add that below here. Add timer. This is going to finish the whole thing and kind of break the whole wall. So I'm going to add this timer. I'm going to name it break. And the time was 0.42. And the function is still going to be the same function. Timer move hammer. But since all of these ask for the name of the timer, it's not going to be ran until until an if statement is actually asking for the break. So actually you could just put the directly the name of the animation, that like the finish animation that I'm gonna make the block for that soon, but apparently it was done this way. It doesn't matter too much, but we can just do it this way. And basically after this one, you need to add the swings, so that once it is exactly 3, it's going to increment into 4. And when it's 4, that means it's not going to run this, because 4 is not less than 3, and 4 is not exactly 3, so it's not going to run either of these after that. But then, that is when it's going to do else if. This goes very far, as I said. It's a pretty big script. Else if swings equals exactly 4. So this one is only ran at the very end. And the timer, if the, no, actually, yeah, what am I doing? And as timer. So it's going to ask if swings has become 4 and the timer is break. That is when we're going to run this one animation, or not animation, but we're going to finish up. We're gonna break the wall, and we're gonna add the particles and the sounds. But since they're actually part of the entity, I don't need to add them through the script. So, but we'll just keep that as a separate object. So instead of doing a block in here, you could do it like this and do everything in here. That is going to happen when you finish this. But instead, I'm going to separate it into a different block. So I'm going to do finish animation with no parameters. And basically, we haven't made that yet. That is a custom block function. So we can make a void finish animation and just put all the things that we're going to run in there instead. Just keep things a little separated. And lastly, else if swings equals 4, which is the same, but this time it's going to ask if as timer equals repeat, which is the last timer, repeat, with the quotes that I forgot, and that is my dog in the background if you can hear it. I don't know. Yeah, so this will add a block because it's going to run 2 things instead of 1. So this is the very last part of the timer, because the repeat timer is always the last one to run, even after the break, because it's 0.8 instead of 0.4. So it's always the last one, and the swings have now come all the way up to 4, which is the last swing. You can, of course, adjust these numbers. If you make 3 into 4, 3 into 4, 4 into 5, 4 into 5, then it's going to be 5 swings instead of 4 in total, which you can do that if you'd like. Inside here, we want to disable the hammer. So actually, the reason I had 2 over there was because I had a chipper to begin with, so you don't actually need these blocks here. So you just do set entity active there with object hammer. It's really difficult to type because I have the keyboard on the left of the microphone instead of the middle of the desk, so it's, oh well. So we'll just run this, which is the exact same script. At the very top here, we enable the hammer, and down here, we disable the hammer, because we don't want a floating hammer to be there forever. Now, to finish this off completely, we want to just do this custom void finish animation with no parameters. And remember, there's no semicolon in constructors. This is a constructor for this block. There are no semicolons there, but there is one there because that is calling it, in case you didn't know. And here, we're just gonna finish everything off. You can add your own kind of effects here, maybe play some music or whatever, but importantly, you want to set prop health. This is kind of specific to this entity in itself, because this wall itself can be broken. If yours cannot, you'll have to set entity active false with the one you're currently using, and then enable at the same time a broken version, and then add the particle systems manually. But since this one has a broken version already inside the same kind of entity, you can just set prop health fake wall to 0. It kills the wall and breaks it. And here you can also add, for example, give sanity boost. You can give a sanity boost that it doesn't take parameters, okay? And play sound at entity, which you might want to play a break sound, because this is a kind of loud kind of break. So no name. The file name is 03_break_wall. And then there is the object you want to play it on, fake wall. And 0 false, which I already explained. And that is absolutely everything that we need to put in the script. So we could try and test run this and see if everything works. We might have to do some adjustment to the positioning of the hammer. Yeah, so let's see. Tutorial start. And there was an error somewhere in the script. Let's see, 5326. That means line 53, character 26. So well, let's find that. 53. There is something here. Ah, yes. I forgot a comma. See, so let's try to redo that. And yeah, commas, any small kind of typos, they are just be careful when you write things, or you might get an error that you don't know why happened. Alright, so everything worked fine this time. We can pick up the hammer. This is called item hammer internally, but it's called hammer visually. You can use the hammer on the area, which is right here. So, haha. Well, that kind of messed up. The rotation was wrong, as you obviously saw. That means we need to do something like this. Like that. Actually, probably better if I do it through script. Let's see, which one is it? It's actually, let's put this one back to 0. And just put on the grid. I like to be precise so that it doesn't, instead of having 89.9 degrees, I like to use 90, just like that. And we will rotate it like that. We'll see how that goes. But otherwise, the whole function ran perfectly fine. Pick up the hammer and use it on there. And that worked pretty well, actually, for being kinda the first try. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. And if you need to adjust the positioning, then just grab both of these and slightly move them closer if you want to do that, or the distance between them, because if you, for example, if you move this one back here, it's going to look very strange. So let me just show you that. It's going to look very strange because you're going to rotate around that point, which is behind it, like that. So it looks very messed up. So we want to move that over there. And that is it for this function, or this whole animation sequence. It seems to work pretty well, like that. And that is pretty much it for this tutorial, I suppose. Yeah, that would be it. And sorry if my keyboard is kind of loud. I should probably get a shock mount for this microphone. I have ordered a pop filter, so that should probably help a little bit with the popping. Other than that, I guess I could start working some more on that custom story project. Although I have been distracted with Skyrim a lot lately, but anyways, that should be it for this tutorial. And I hope you found it helpful in any way, shape, or form. And if you did, I would really appreciate if you would like the video. It motivates me to make more of these tutorials. Other than that, I guess that would be everything. I will thank you for watching, and I will see you later.